A reserved teenager named Calvin Cal Chetley lives in the suburbs of Oklahoma with his mother Sharon and spends most of his time reading books and studying, which gives him immense academic success. In school, Cal likes to keep to himself and doesn't have many friends except his neighbor Luli, with whom he has grown up, and his nerdy classmate Donald, who's worse at making friends than he is. Even though Cal has a very close relationship with his supportive mother, he usually finds himself longing for a male figure. While Cal was just a toddler, his father, the great wrestling champion Mac, had died in a tragic car accident, and hence, he never really got to know him. But despite being too young to remember the details, Cal does know that the family has never really recovered from the loss. Cal's older brother Mike, who had also taken after his father to become a wrestling champion multiple years in a row, was greatly affected by the loss. Mike and Mac had done everything together, from training to scouting to dieting. In the following few years, time hadn't eased Mike's grief, but instead, it seemed to destroy him more. Hence, Mike started fighting with Sharon, who, despite being grief-stricken, was trying to keep it together for the sake of her family. And soon he moved out of the house, never to be seen or heard from again. Despite being heartbroken by losing her son, on top of her husband, Sharon has too much on her plate to deal with the situation and lets Mike be, desperately hoping that more time might do them both good and they will happily reunite someday. As time goes by, Cal absorbs everything around him and grows up to be an observant and responsible young man who prefers the company of books over his peers. This works out in his favor. And while in middle school, Cal wins a geology competition. Surprisingly, instead of blowing through the prize money like boys his age would have, Cal starts a catfish farm that soon becomes successful and supports both himself and his mother, who's very proud of him. One day, while fishing at a local lake, as Cal quietly tries to work out how to fix his damaged water pump for his farm, he is attacked by the school bully named Billy Marrow, who, angered by Cal's attempt to defend himself, pushes him to the ground and flees. Then, as Cal nurses his wounds, he meets an old fisherman named Red, who seems to have appeared out of nowhere to appreciate his courage to defend himself and advises him to always believe and stand up for himself. Later, Cal returns home and nurses his bruises. Then, like he always does when he feels low, Cal takes a moment to go through his memory box, longingly flipping through old pictures of his father, his car accident report, and wonders if he would have turned out different had he been around. Then, noticing Sharon return from work and hoping to hide all his pain from her at any cost necessary, Cal quickly puts everything back in the box and rushes out to greet her. As the duo embraces, Sharon is terrified to see Cal's wounds, but he assures her that it was an accident and that he's okay.
Somebody hit you? Tell me who, Calvin.
Wow, what are you gonna do, pop a cap in his butt?
Elsewhere, a few counties over in Muskogee, while working on an oil rig, Mike gets some bad news.
Real sorry, Mike, but I gotta let you go and hit TD on this one.
In the next few days, the more Cal thinks about Mike and his late father, the more he misses them, the more he becomes flooded with a desperate yearning to connect with them, and he searches for ways to do so. After a lengthy soul-searching, Cal finds the perfect answer that would connect him to both: wrestling. However, knowing everything Sharon has gone through, which has led her to hate wrestling and be completely against it, Cal keeps his new idea to himself. Then, for the next few weeks, Cal informs his mother that he has extracurricular activities after school and starts going to the school gym. But instead of joining the wrestling team immediately, Cal just sits back, intently observing and studying the practice sessions. Then, Cal shares his new interest with Luli, who has always had a crush on him and is grateful to have her support. One day, Cal decides to finally take the next step, and instead of observing steps forward at the gym.
Black light on the mat, sir.
Then, the unassuming coach chooses Billy as Cal's partner and orders him to take it easy on the newcomer and show him a few things. However, instead of following the order, the bully takes this as his license to attack Cal, and he brutally beats him until the coach interferes.
You guys have some kind of history between you?
Later that night, over dinner, unable to lie to his mother any longer, Cal reveals that he has started wrestling and hence is dieting and watching his weight to maintain 135 pounds.
Where'd you get that scale?
Donald had an extra one.
After considering what her son just shared, Sharon understands Cal's need to feel closer to his father through wrestling and through Mike, but is still terrified for him nonetheless, as she had watched it consume two of the most important men in her life. Then, Sharon reminds Cal that he hasn't seen his brother in almost a decade, points out that he doesn't really know him as much as he thinks he does, and warns him never to trust that he will help him reconnect with their late father. Why is Sharon so against Mike? Cal thinks about everything his mother said, but has a hard time accepting it. Then, a few days later, desperately hoping that his mother is wrong about Mike, Cal searches for his address and once he finds it, decides to pay him a visit. One afternoon, Cal tells his mother that he's staying over at Donald's house and leaves the house. He then takes the bus to Muskogee, and on the way, as he wonders what it would be like to see his brother after all these years, he is filled with a million questions. Cal reaches the bus stop before he can answer any of the questions and is forced to push them aside as he walks around trying to locate Mike's residence. He then knocks on the door, is invited by one of Mike's friends, and he slowly enters the house. Inside, it doesn't go as Cal expected at all. Mike is taken aback to see his little brother there, but that's about it. There is absolutely no other emotion that can be discerned from Mike's expression, and he stoically asks him what he's doing there, as if he were an acquaintance he sees every day. Cal takes this all in, but instead of being disappointed or angry with his older brother, he decides to give him the benefit of the doubt and tries to reason that the unexpected reunion must be hard on Mike too. Then, after a few moments of restrained greetings, Cal shares his decision to join the wrestling team and asks Mike for help.
I think I could be good with the right kind of training.
Cal is shocked and gutted to hear the answer, but he quickly tries to recover. Then, he reasons that Mike may in fact be busy, takes the decision on the chin, and hopes to at least get a chance to rebuild a relationship.
Cal, I'm just real busy right now.
Heartbroken, Cal slowly walks out of the house and heads home, thinking his mother may have been right after all. Meanwhile, Mike, who is also heartbroken to realize that there's nothing he can offer his younger brother, sits on the couch, frozen for hours, thinking about his life and the person he has become. Elsewhere, desperate to rescue her youngest child, Sharon goes to the school and speaks to the coach.
I've already lost one kid to the sport. I don't want to go through it again.
Knowing everything Sharon's been through, the coach comforts her, and after advising against pulling Cal out of the team, he promises to watch out for him. On the other side of town, crushed by his interaction with Mike, Cal rushes to the lake to clear his head, runs into Red, and shares what's bothering him.
I want to wrestle.
Wrestle?
A few days later, at the high school wrestling game, a 135-pound Riverdale wrestler gets injured, and Cal freaks out.
I'm Timmy's backup. I'm the same weight class.
Forced by this new circumstance, Cal calls Mike at his house, but only finds his girlfriend. Hence, he begs her to inform Mike that he will be wrestling this coming Friday. Cal desperately hopes to hear back from Mike before the week's out, but is disappointed when Friday comes around, without even a peep from his brother. On Friday, at the weigh-in in the gym, Cal whimpers in fear at the sight of his opponent and starts doubting his decision to join the team. Meanwhile, despite being against Cal's newfound interest, Sharon decides to support him nonetheless and shows up at the school. Then, as she walks to the gym, she walks by the school's wall of fame, sees Mike's name, his achievements, and trophy, and stands there for minutes, nostalgically thinking of her firstborn. At the match, to the horror of Sharon and Luli, just like Cal feared, he is brutally beaten by his opponent and loses the game.
You get easier after this, all right? Go have that looked at.
Okay.
Once Cal realizes how hard wrestling is, he considers quitting, but is backed into a corner as he is the only 135-pound wrestler on the team. In the next few matches, Cal is brutally beaten and humiliated on the mat. Elsewhere, in Muskogee, now jobless and without prospects, Mike goes to a local bar one afternoon, hoping to kill some time. However, while there, an aggressive man incites an argument and proceeds to hit him, and Mike retaliates and defends himself well. Unfortunately, the authorities fail to examine the details of the incident, and Mike goes to jail. Elsewhere, hoping to get some perspective, Cal asks Donald his opinion on his boxing.
You haven't officially wrestled in enough matches to be considered the worst wrestler in the region.
Ouch. Come on, Donald. Then, as the boys leave school, they run into Billy, who mocks Mike's fall from grace in front of everyone and gives him a local newspaper with an announcement of Mike's arrest.
Mike Chetley, 28-year-old, was arrested and charged with major assault.
Stressed out by what he discovers, Cal goes to the lake to fish and clear his mind. There, Cal meets Red, who, after hearing what's on the young man's mind, offers his advice.
If you need your brother, I can promise you that he needs you.
Inspired by this, Cal wakes up early the next morning, rushes to Luli's house to borrow her scooter, and, after lying to his mother and telling her that he has to get to school early, speeds to the courthouse in Muskogee. There, Mike's lawyer describes the situation and, on behalf of Mike, asks the court for probation. As the judge prepares to make a decision on Mike's case, Cal asks to speak on behalf of his brother.
I'm gonna give you my word that you won't see either one of us in your courtroom ever again.
Mike is extremely touched by Cal's gesture, and afterwards, the brothers go to Mike's house to catch up.
What do you want?
I don't know.
I meant, what do you want to eat?
Then, hoping to make up for all the times he wasn't there for his younger brother, Mike accepts Cal's request and agrees to teach him wrestling. Meanwhile, after not hearing from Cal all day, a worried Sharon goes to the gym at school to check on him and becomes extremely worried to see that he's not there. Then, out of desperation, Sharon reaches out to Luli for information, but once again comes up short. Later, Cal gets home and after lying to his worried mother and telling her that he was out with friends, gets straight to his room and shuts himself in. Then, after missing weeks of practice, which forced the team to forfeit a match in his weight class, Cal returns to the gym at school and prepares to join practice.
Cal, we had to forfeit a match because of you. Screw up again and you're done. Do you understand each other?
Then, Mike and Cal start their training and work intensely for the next couple of weeks. As the duo spends a lot of time together, exercising intensely, they get to know each other better and start enjoying each other's company. With his passion reignited, Cal follows each of Mike's instructions and pointers to a T and dedicates himself to learning each aspect of the sport. Then, seeing that Mike has still not gotten a job, Cal takes it upon himself to land him one through his geology class, which Mike deeply appreciates. Which one is the older brother again? As Mike and Cal continue spending a lot of time together, they grow closer and bond.
No, I ain't used to getting that kind of help.
Mike continues training Cal as hard as he can, and soon the next match arrives. Hoping to show him what he's learned from him so far, Cal invites Mike to attend the game at school. Taken aback by the unexpected request, Mike takes a moment to answer and calmly explains that he's neither ready to face their mother nor the locals, whom he fears will ask him about what he's been up to since his Glory High School days, as he doesn't have an answer to give. On the match day, just like Mike has taught him to do, Cal confidently stares down his opponent during the weigh-in. He then finds a quiet corner of the gym, listens to his favorite music, and grounds himself in preparation for the match. Then, as Donald, Luli, and Sharon watch in anticipation, the match starts. Now, stronger than ever, Cal gets on the mat and, using everything he's learned from his brother, comprehensively wins the match. Unbeknownst to everyone, unable to stay away, Mike discreetly shows up at the gym, hides in the hallway, watches the game from afar, and just like Sharon and Luli, he is utterly delighted by Cal's achievements. On the other side of the gym, Red, who has also shown up to watch Cal, sits unassumingly among the crowd and cheers on Cal with utter pride and joy. Meanwhile, hoping to stay hidden, Mike proceeds to leave the gym before the match finishes, and the crowd disperses. But as he walks out, he's haunted by the halls of his old high school, which hold memories of his exceptional achievements. In the next few weeks, Cal continues racking up impressive wins, and Mike continues discreetly showing up for each one. Then, seeing how good Cal is getting, Mike starts making big plans.
Serious enough to show me the reverse cradle?
No.
A few weeks later, as the school dance approaches and everyone begins to excitedly prepare, Luli asks Cal to take her to the dance, and he accepts. At home, despite attending each of Cal's games, Sharon senses that their relationship is growing strained, and in hopes of assuring her son that she's always rooting for him, she reaches out to Cal. Cal understands where his mother is coming from and assures her how happy he is.
Well, it must be working. You look good.
However, not wanting to distress his mother further, Cal hides the fact that he's been training with Mike. Then one day, Mike introduces Cal to a wrestler named Theo Gnat Henderson, whom he brings on to their training team. In the next few weeks, Cal trains as hard as he can with the men, follows his diet strictly, and gains visible changes in strength. Then, on the day of the dance, knowing that Luli lives with her father and 4 brothers, and hoping to provide her with some quality girl time, Sharon invites her over and helps her with her makeup and hair and gives her some motherly advice.
Be confident. Don't chase. Be chased. I wish.
Elsewhere, during training, Nat pulls Mike aside and checks on him to see where his head is at and how he's handling everything. Then, wishing only the best for his friend, Nat advises him to keep working hard, stay out of trouble, and fight off the demons in his head to be the man he used to be, for the sake of his little brother, who looks up to him. Then, Mike, who is so proud of Cal's progress and efforts, decides to show his brother the difficult reverse cradle move, which excites the teenager, and the brothers spend a couple of hours practicing it. Later that night, Cal goes to the dance with Luli, and just as they begin to enjoy themselves, Billy comes up to Luli and starts to verbally harass her. Despite Luli's attempt to defend herself, Cal steps in and pushes his bully to the ground with minimal effort. Oh, how the tables have turned! Then, Luli and Cal leave the school and walk around town, discussing the events of the night. Then, Cal assures Luli that he will always be there for her, and the duo starts a relationship. Meanwhile, in Muskogee, after weeks of hard work, Mike decides to let loose, goes to the local bar, and gets some beer. However, moments later, he remembers the trouble he had gotten into the last time he was there, and the promise he had given to the judge and himself, and without even taking a sip of the beer, pays his tab, and proceeds to leave. However, as soon as Mike steps outside, a group of men who are holding a grudge against him for beating their friend last time surround him. Then, hoping to avoid getting into trouble and violating his parole by any means necessary, Mike tries to calm the situation down, to no avail. Hence, as the men start to attack him, Mike is forced to defend himself, gets into a fight, and beats up a couple of them before he's knocked out. The next evening, Cal goes to Muskogee to train with Mike, but is confused to see that his older brother is nowhere to be found. However, without being discouraged or thinking about it too much, Cal reasons that Mike is probably busy and trains alone for a couple of hours before heading home. Then, as soon as Cal walks in, he freezes in shock and fear as he hears Sharon speaking to Mike on the phone. And soon, an intense argument breaks out.
A month? And that's where you've been?
As the argument gets heated, Cal is forced to once again stand up for his older brother, and he assures Sharon that Mike would never let him down. Must have been set up, and there is no way he would have been found drunk as hasn't had a sip of alcohol in the last month. Then, to Sharon's horror, the teenager explains that Mike has been teaching him wrestling and that he's the reason for his success.
Because he's my brother. I have the right to know my own brother.
What are you afraid of, Sharon? While Mike sits in jail, cursing his luck and wondering why trouble always seems to find him, Cal and Sharon spend the next couple of hours on opposite sides of the house, trying to calm down from their anger towards one another and the situation as a whole. After thinking about everything thoroughly, even though he was too young to remember details of the accident, Cal surmises that all the hurt and pent-up anger of the family leads back to that fateful incident, and hence decides to talk to his mother about it. Sharon becomes emotional at the mention of her late husband, but musters up her courage and narrates what happened, and starts by explaining that Mac was Mike's trainer, and that the duo did everything together. Then, one day, about a decade ago, as Mike and Mac prepared for an upcoming match, despite Mac's confidence in his son's ability to take out his opponent, he had accepted Mike's suggestion to drive into the next town to scout out the opponent, so that he would know what to expect and prepare for the match better. Hence, despite Mac's reluctance and Sharon's plea to stay back, the duo had started driving in the snow, lost control of the car, and Mike was luckily thrown out of the car, while his father died inside. Man, that's a lot of guilt to carry for one man. After hearing the story intently, the pieces of the fragmented family finally start to fall into place for the teenager. While he sympathizes with his mother, who has still not recovered completely from the tragedy. But most of all, Cal's heart breaks for Mike, who's had to live with such unrelenting guilt, grief, and loss, and starts to understand the reason behind his brother's hollowness. A few days later, Cal and his team prepare and head to Tulsa with their coach to compete for regionals. Meanwhile, Cal's words linger in Sharon's mind, and she decides to give Mike the benefit of the doubt and help him. Hence, she tracks down witnesses from the bar and confirms that Mike was indeed sober during the ordeal and was set up by his attackers. She then talks to the DA's office and Mike's parole officer and works out a deal for Mike. Sharon then visits Mike in jail.
I want my son back, but I still don't know how.
In Tulsa, Cal is accompanied by Donald and Luli, who cheer him on from the stands, and he wins all of his matches and makes it to the semifinals. However, with his brother's case on his mind, Cal is unable to celebrate his feat and leaves his friends behind to return home. Elsewhere, in Muskogee, after getting Mike released from prison, Sharon drives him to his house, steps inside the shabby home her son made for himself, and becomes devastated to see the empty, cold place Mike had chosen to imprison himself in. Then, suddenly, realizing that all Cal ever wanted to do was bring the family together, Sharon takes a step forward and shares what's in her heart.
You don't belong here.
Maybe I do.
No, you don't.
Seeing Mike hanging on to her every word, Sharon's heart bleeds for her hurt son, and she lovingly embraces and comforts him for the first time since the tragedy.
Is trying to pull you out.
That night, as soon as he gets home, Cal rushes to his mother to find out how Mike's case is going and is quite relieved to hear that his brother is a free man. Then, after hearing Cal's success in the regionals, to Cal's surprise, Sharon motivates him to continue pursuing wrestling. The next day, at regionals, amidst the cheer of the crowd and chaos of the gym, Cal goes to a quiet corner and tries to ground himself like he always does, to prepare for his match. However, instead of pushing him forward, the quiet peace actually makes Cal realize that he never cared that much about wrestling, and that his journey was about something far greater than prevailing on the mat. It was about healing his fragmented family. With both Sharon and Mike nowhere to be seen, Cal suddenly feels like a failure, and he finds himself questioning why he was still preparing for a fight in the semifinals, while he had miserably failed at the all-important fight to bring his family together. With no satisfying answer to be found anywhere in his mind, Cal grabs his things and proceeds to leave the arena, but is soon surprised to run into Red, who has come to watch his match.
I'm done. I didn't want this.
Win, Cal. Just don't quit.
The way Red shows up at the most important moments is like a guardian angel. Inspired to give it all he has, Cal decides to finish what he started and goes to the bathroom to wash his face and fears away. Then, as Cal returns to the match, searching the stands with his eyes for his mother and Mike, he finds Sharon sitting with his friends and is relieved, but is devastated by Mike's absence. Hence, Cal is filled with a million questions going through his head. Where's Mike? How can he miss the biggest match of his life? Did the past few weeks mean nothing to Mike? What should he have done differently to successfully bring the family together? Cal tries to work through these questions vainly and becomes utterly distracted, which shows on the mat, as he's heavily beaten in the first period of the match. Then, as Cal continues going through the motions, hoping it will all be over soon, he looks up and is pleasantly surprised to see Mike walk through the gym, proudly wearing his team's colors and taking a seat. This gives Cal the push he needs to prevail, and to the delight of everyone, he quickly overpowers his opponent and wins the match. In the following break, as the time for the final is announced, Mike rushes to Cal and proudly congratulates him alongside the coach.
Hey, good to see you, Mike.
You too, Coach.
Hey, it's been a long time.
Too long.
Then, Mike advises Cal to stay focused and give it all he has, and with only a few minutes left for the final, he leaves him to his music so that he can use it to ground himself and mentally prepare for the biggest match of his life. Then, Mike and Sharon meet, and as they discuss the match and proceed to head back inside, Luli approaches Mike with a giant gift box and asks him to give it to Cal before the match. Then, Mike and Nat take the box to the locker and give it to Cal, who opens it and is touched to find a small pump and a personalized boxing robe.
Wow.
That's Luli, too.
A few minutes later, when his name is called, Cal wears his boxing robe and is proudly escorted to the match with Mike and Nat, and with the help of Donald, makes quite an entrance. Then, as he prepares to get on the mat, Cal notices Mike greeting Red from afar and wonders how his big brother knows the old fisherman and gets the shock of his life.
His dad's coach.
Red's dad's coach?
Then, as the final goes underway, Mike takes a seat next to the coach and is welcomed by the wrestling world on the PA system. Cal gives the match everything he has, and everyone holds their breath as they watch each move, nervously anticipating what's going to happen next. However, after a few brutal minutes of wrestling, Cal's opponent wins by decision, and Cal misses out on the title. However, as far as Cal's concerned, he's a winner already, as he finally has a united family. Utterly grateful for everything, Cal rushes to Mike to thank him for his help, and then heads to Sharon and Luli to do the same. It seems some victories are about the journey and not the result. Then, as Mike joins his family at the stands, he receives a standing ovation from the crowd, who respectfully acknowledge all he has contributed to the wrestling world. Mike is touched by the gesture and wholeheartedly takes it all in. Then, moments later, to the surprise of everyone, Billy congratulates Cal for his outstanding accomplishment, which Cal accepts with true sportsmanship. Seeing this heartwarming outcome, which assures him that the Chetleys will be all right, amidst the deafening cheer of the crowd, Red quietly leaves the gym and heads home, finally at peace, by fulfilling the promise he made to Mac about watching out for his family. With Mike by his side, Cal goes on to win 48 matches in his senior year.